Welcome to Crash Course in Commercial Real Estate. We converted our in-house training program to a podcast to teach you prospecting, negotiation, business planning, and other fundamental skills to become a successful commercial real estate agent. And now, here's your host, Brady Collier.
Welcome back. I'm excited for all of the things we're going to record today. Shannon, we have several really exciting ones. We're going to start with what makes a great client. And at this stage of your real estate career, with just over 3 weeks in the business, every client, they say that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So to you, at your stage of your career, everybody looks like a good client because they have money and they want to do a real estate deal. But I think it's important. We have a few on similar topics. One's going to be what makes a great client, so you know what types of clients to pursue, engage with, keep, work hard for, and which clients to fire. That's going to be how we're going to close this, is when do you fire a client? Which, yeah, sounds really harsh, right? And then we're also going to talk about, in the same vein, how do you qualify buyers and tenants and clients to make sure they're worth working for. Because we're going to find that your commodity is your time, and you got to use your time well. So you got to work with great clients. So we're here with Kyle. He is our subject matter expert once again. And if this is your first time you've joined us, this is Shannon. I'm Brady Collier, and Shannon's in training to be a commercial real estate broker in Lubbock, Texas. And so, Kyle, let's dialogue a little bit about what makes a great client.
Yeah. So if you think of your commercial real estate business as a business selling your commodity, we have Uncle Julio's behind us. Their commodity, what they're selling, is Mexican food. Ross is over there. They sell clothing and soft goods. What is it in commercial real estate that we have that we're bringing to our clients? What is our commodity that we have to offer? And really, the only thing we have is our time. It's our time. We have a limited number of time, like Uncle Julio's has a limited number of enchiladas that they can sell.
They have a limited number of seats that they can sit.
Yeah, that's right. Well. That's right. They can always go get more food. But we have a limited number of time. And there's other variables like our expertise that we can increase, the size of transaction, how fast we can move deals forward. But all of it takes a certain amount of our time. And so when we work with clients, and Brady hit on this right now, you want to add as many clients as you can because it's going to increase your expertise. You're going to exposure to different opportunities, but eventually you're going to run out of time, and you can fix that problem by adding to your team, bringing on admin to help support you, or you can fire clients that aren't worth your time.
Yes.
And so that brings some context to why this topic's so important. Is if you waste time, it's dollars in this business.
Our encouragement for you in your first months, let's just take your first year while you're in the business. Our encouragement is going to be do as many deals as you can do different types of deals. I mean, just actively close transactions, because it's going to broaden your base of knowledge, understanding. You're going to become a more valuable asset to all of the people you serve. But soon after that, depending on how quickly your career ramps up, we're going to say now you need to limit who you work for to make sure you're able to give them the right amount of time to do them a great job. And so let's talk, Kyle, about what makes a client great. And I would say there's 2 to 3 characteristics. There's what makes it that makes them worth working for. So if you had to say what makes your most valuable clients valuable to you, where would you start with that?
Yeah, I would start with the fact, are they going to make commercial real estate decisions? Are they going to buy or sell or lease? And depending on what area of commercial real estate business you're in, that looks a lot of different ways. So if you're in landlord rep, it's how much inventory do they control? How much product do they have? If you're representing buyers, it's how much capital do they have to deploy? Is that, do they have a fund where they have to deploy a certain amount of money? Are they constantly in tax situations where they have to place money? There's a lot of things that can identify, but do they have money to buy, and are they consistently buying? And so inventory, buy, sell, lease, it just depends on that client. But are they going to make decisions, and how many decisions are they going to make them? How often are they going to make them?
Well, let's start with do they make decisions? I recently had a client on the development side of my business, and they wanted a lot of time. They wanted analysis of their property and so on and so forth. But it was a state entity. Well, I've worked with state entities before. For them to get to a development decision, as bad as they wanted to do this, it has to go through Austin and it has to go through a selection process. It's a multi-year deal. It has to be put out to the market. So if I invest all this time on the front side, I'm equipping them to hire most likely one of my competitors to go and do that work. So there's going to be a lot of people who want a lot of your time, but don't actually have the decision-making authority to give you an assignment, a listing, a buyer rep, a tenant rep, or whatever. So do they have the authority? We're going to get back to that in qualifying. And then how much capital do they have to place? So if somebody says, I want to buy a piece of commercial real estate, I have $100,000, that's great. If somebody says, he said, a fund, I want to buy some commercial real estate, I need to place $10 million in the next 45 days. That's the kind of client you want to work with. Somebody who has access to a lot of capital and who has an urgency to place that capital. And so if somebody says, I got a building, I don't care if I sell it, if I don't sell it, it doesn't really matter. That's one level. I have a building, I need it sold in the next 90 days because I need to take that money and go do something else. That's a better client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are scenarios where I think a client is that. I mean, and we'll get into how do you determine that? What questions do you ask? But I'm working with a national, not a retailer, but a national business. You'd know the name right now on a relocation within Lubbock, Texas. And so I thought they have to relocate. They have to relocate within 12 months. It's a little bit outside of what I traditionally work on. And so I was hesitant, but there was urgency. They had a need. There was product available for them. And then COVID hit and they were able to extend their lease for a year. And I've been spinning my wheels with this client for 2 years now. So I made the wrong decision and now I'm stuck and I probably should just fire them. But then you have all this, sunk cost, all this time that you've spent on them that you don't want to waste, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so, you can make the wrong decision with somebody that you think checks those boxes. They're going to make a decision and there's urgency. But that leads me to my next thing I would say is, is there a potential for a long-term relationship and repeat business with this client? So this one that I chose to move forward with, it's going to be one. They'll do one deal in Lubbock. It's
one and done. We call those one and done.
One and done. And so not only am I wasting lots of time, is once I do it and split it with their master broker, it'll be the only deal I ever do with them. And so as opposed to, a restaurant that's a national franchise, and we cover here in our office, we cover Amarillo down to Midland, Odessa, San Angelo. So there's about 7 markets. And so if I represent a national franchise that has a franchisee that owns all of West Texas, and they want to start in Lubbock, I can evaluate and say, okay, I have an opportunity to do 3 stores in Lubbock, maybe 2 in Amarillo, 1 in Midland, 1 in Odessa, 1 in San Angelo. So I have the opportunity to not do one deal with this franchisee, but to do 7 or 8.
And the reason that's really important, Shannon, what he just said is really good, repeat customers, is because every time you take on a new customer, or a new client, you have to learn their purchasing habits, their negotiation style, talk about that, but once you start doing repeat deals, you develop a relationship. It just it makes everything easier because you're into a flow. And so that's that whole time issue.
That's right.
If you had to take 10 clients brand new versus 1 client and do 10 deals with them, that's way better.
That's right. You learn how they think. You start to think the same way about real estate. You're able to not make decisions on their behalf, but progress and move the deal forward much more quickly without a lot of dialogue and conversation. I have a tenant rep client that I've done 20 deals for, and it's turned out to be all across the country. And those first deals were painful as far as how we would evaluate each deal. And that was twofold. 1, it was his second deal to ever do, so he was just slower. And 2, he didn't know me at all. And so there was no relationship.
No trust.
And now I'll submit LOIs on sites with as much as a 2-second conversation, because I know exactly what his deal needs to look like. I know the sites that meet his criteria. I know how he wants to counter, and he trusts me to do that. And so now we can do 6 or 7 transactions in a year, probably in the time we did that first in that first deal.
Okay, let's flip the coin. That's the kind of clients you want to work for, what are the kinds of clients you don't want to work for? Clearly, the antithesis of each one of those points, if they don't have a lot of money, if they don't have decision making, if they're a one and done, you don't want to work for those. But let's take it a degree further. What are other things about clients that you do not want to work for?
Yeah. So your reputation is on the line when you work with a client here in Lubbock, Texas. So if some investment buyer or some business owner that's going to come do one deal in Lubbock, Texas, they don't really care about their negotiation reputation or their ethical reputation within the market. And so if you decide to represent a client that views relationships in that way, and you're the representation of them, you could do irreparable damage to your own relationship because of how your client chooses to do business.
Your relationships within the market with other brokers,
Right.
with landlords, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind is if you deal with somebody that doesn't have the same ethics that you do, and that hurts your reputation, that would be a horrible client to take on.
Have you had to take on one of those?
I mean, you deal with people in this business that you can quickly tell the way in which they negotiate, the way in which they talk about people. You start to question, should I really sign up to represent them?
Yeah, I have had clients ask me to do unethical, dishonest things, and I just had to say, hey, that's a line I'm not willing to cross. If you want to do that, you're gonna hire somebody else or do it yourself. I won't go there. So yeah, you will have clients ask you to do unethical, and I mean even sometimes illegal things like hide things, and such as that. And you just got to draw the line and say, hey, that I don't play that game. Sorry.
Yeah, and sometimes you can provide alternatives.
Yes.
If they want to retrade in a certain way or just not disclose something, I can't do that. That falls outside of
Hold
what
on
I
one
believe
second.
is
So
right.
retrade, you've already agreed to all the terms, and then during the due diligence, you're going to go back and retrade on all of those terms right before closing. So that's called a retrade. And sometimes there's bona fide legit reasons why you have to retrade a deal. There's some people that are, and he's had clients that they're going to retrade every single deal at the last minute just to see how much lower they can beat the price and so on and so forth. And they don't care who they beat, who they abuse in the process. And those are the kind of people he's talking about. They can really hurt your reputation because then other agents in the market start thinking, oh, Shannon's bringing me this deal, but she's bringing it at $1.2 million. Let me tell you, seller, I know they're going to come back at the last minute and ask for a $300,000 price reduction. So you just need to think about that when we're negotiating with her. And it may be a totally different client, but that reflects on your reputation. Mm-hmm. You've seen that for sure.
Yeah, and that doesn't always mean you don't work with them. You know, some of these clients I represent all over the state of Texas in different markets, and yeah, they really, really push the negotiation, and it works, unfortunately. We get more each time we push further, and we're getting a little bit off into negotiation. But if I don't have to have an ongoing relationship with that landlord and we're not doing anything unethical, we haven't agreed to something and try to change the deal, but we're just pushing for additional free rent once we're far enough into the negotiation process, then I'll do that for my client. If that was here in my backyard in Lubbock with brokers I have to work with all the time, maybe it's a different conversation. I'm not saying I wouldn't. You just have to evaluate
You would
each
crawl
situation.
across a mile of broken glass on the way to their office just to show them how bad you feel about doing it to them. Let's talk about another aspect of it, and that's how clients treat you. Let me just say, Kyle has an amazing tolerance to be abused by clients because he loves the deal. I don't know if it's pride or what it is, but I have way less tolerance. If somebody's like screaming profanity at me on the phone, I'm like, you know what? Have a nice life. And so, Kyle, speak a little bit to how to discern when to fire a client over the way that they treat you, whether they lie to you, whether they speak to you disrespectfully.
Yeah.
And so can you speak to that
and
aspect of firing a client?
It's a sliding scale, right? I mean, how much you're willing to take is proportionate to how many deals and how much opportunity there is with that client. So if they're going to do one deal and they're hard to work with, you definitely won't work with them. If they're extremely hard to deal with, but you've got 50 potential transactions over the next 5 years, you're probably going to withstand a lot more abuse.
And how much you need the money. If you're really early in your career and you don't have
touche,
and you need
what are you replacing them with? What? And so, you want to work with people that you enjoy. And I really believe you'll be more successful working with people that you enjoy and you have good relationships with and you trust. And so you have to evaluate that personally. What brings fulfillment to you in your work and what you enjoy. But also, I've had clients that have been extremely difficult until I built their trust. And so I can think of some clients that were really hard to deal with for the first 6 to 12 months. And then over time, as we became friends and the relationship was built and the trust grew, it was much more enjoyable for, I think, both sides to work. And so, again, with a lot of this, what makes the right client, a lot of it has to do with where you're at, how much time you have, what your other opportunities are to make that decision.
Yeah. One thing that neither Kyle and I have walked a mile in your shoes, we've only been men in commercial real estate. We've never been a woman in commercial real estate. I've never had, in my commercial real estate career, I've never been threatened in any way or felt insecure about the way things were progressing in a relationship with a client, because so I have somebody who's supposed to be coming on a future episode to talk about what it's like to be a woman in commercial real estate. That's one of the questions I'd like to ask her is working with men, because a lot of the decision makers in a lot of these companies are men, and is it awkward or is there hard situations? And so maybe we can get into that in a future episode.
Okay.
But we've never walked a mile in those shoes.
Right. So just one thing to hit on is, I think we're probably getting close to wrapping this one up. I think the biggest thing for what makes the right client, you're going to work with a lot of the wrong clients early on because you're probably going to be afraid and intimidated to ask the appropriate questions. And so I think when you approach a new relationship, don't be afraid to qualify them as a potential client. They don't know how bad you need clients or how bad you want them as a client. So if you ask the questions in the right way, they're actually going to be impressed. And it's going to enable you to serve them better as a broker. So what are your long-term goals here over the next 3 to 5 years with your business? How much money are you looking to place? I want to make sure I send you the right opportunities. So you're asking qualifying questions of them without them knowing it. You're really, trying to ask them questions to serve them, but it's helping you identify, okay, how much time is this person worth of mine? And you'll realize—
And that sounds harsh. How much is this time? Is this person worth? Not on a personal basis, but on a professional basis, is it worth the time to work with them? And you're going to have to make that decision every working day for the next years. You're going to say, should I continue in this or should I drop them? And so you almost got into qualifying buyers and tenants and sellers and landlords. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that one as well, is how do we qualify people? And so we'll get into that qualification process in an upcoming one. Before we close this out, any questions or thoughts on what makes great clients?
No, it's helpful because right now I'm in that position of, yes, I'll take every phone call. I'm like, I'll do it. And someone called the other day and was like, what, do you do apartments? I was like, sure. I don't even know what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah.
So definitely look forward to being able to be more selective. As time goes
And
by.
your relationship with clients that you have relationships with might evolve and change as your time availability shifts. And so being able to navigate that with clients that you build over these next few months, and then a year from now, you don't have the same amount of time and those transactions aren't worth it anymore. And that's where teaming really comes in, because you don't want to hand those clients off. You have great relationships and there's money to be made. And there's other brokers who are newer in the business that would love that client. And so you can still capitalize on that and serve those clients with appropriate teaming. So I think we'll talk more about that.
One thing I would say in closing is there's going to be times that all the rules, if you could qualify everything that we just said as rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, how do I determine my clients, you're going to break all those rules at times. And you're going to be like, this is a time I just want to throw all the rules out and I just want to serve this person well because they need help and I have a heart to help them. Can you think of any times recently where if you ran through that list, you would have disqualified somebody, but yet you still help them with their real estate needs because you had a heart, either them as a person, them as a friend, them, the organization they were behind you believed in, which becomes an act of benevolence almost. But that happens in our career on a regular basis, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I've got a tenant that I'm helping right now that I should hand off, but it's just like, man, they're just great people. I really want to help them.
And you want to make sure they get the best help possible. And if you hand them off, you're like, nobody else is going to work as hard as I'm going to work for them because I either love them, or there was recently a ministry here in Lubbock that reached out to me and Kyle and said, hey, we just need some help with our real estate, whatever. There was not enough dollars attached to that for either one of us to put 1 minute into it. But we really agree with what they do. And so we said, hey, let's go all in and do a great job and get them everything that they need. So those are the rules. There's going to be times we're going to break them. So that's an overview of what makes a great client.